An alarm sounded in the night. The Mexican army had begun their assault on the Alamo. William Travis grabbed his musket, his shotgun, and his body servant Joe, then dashed to defend the makeshift fort. Colonel Travis blasted his shotgun wildly into a mass of Mexican soldiers. Then Colonel William Travis was struck down, fatally hit. Joe fled, finding safety behind the door of a dark storeroom. As the Mexican army seized control of the Alamo, Joe could hear the Mexican soldiers as they swept through the dark passageways of the Alamo, searching for survivors and taking no prisoners. Then, two soldiers burst into Joe's hiding place. One of the soldiers shot Joe, grazing him. The other stabbed Joe with his bayonet, only scratching him. Before the soldiers could finish what they'd started, the Mexican officer in charge put a stop to the attack, saving Joe's life. He took Joe captive and brought him to see General President Santa Anna to be interrogated. Joe was a prisoner of war. He had been a few things in his life: a loyal son, a brother, a dreamer, a field hand. But a prisoner of war? How had Joe gotten to this point? Joe was born around 1815 on the Kentucky plantation of Dr. Young. Joe's mother, Elizabeth, was the daughter of an enslaved woman and the famous frontiersman Daniel Boone. In a world where mothers had no legal say in the lives of their own children, Joe's mother, Elizabeth, worked hard to keep Joe and his 5 siblings together. Yet the threat of the family being broken apart always loomed. Due to a series of financial struggles, Dr. Young sold one of Joe's sisters. After a failed escape attempt, Joe's older brother William was rented out to another plantation. But William vowed to one day escape a life of slavery. In 1829, Dr. Young sold Joe, his mother, his sister, and his brother Milford to a businessman named Isaac Mansfield. Despite laws prohibiting slavery in Mexico, Mansfield moved to Mexico's Texas region, carrying Joe and his family with him. After a series of economic hard times fell upon Mansfield, he rented Joe to various plantations, including that of attorney William Barrett Travis, who, after the death of Isaac Mansfield, ended up becoming Joe's owner. Joe had been sold no less than 4 times throughout his life. Certainly Joe longed to own himself. When the Texas Revolution broke out, William B. Travis set his mind on Texas independence from Mexico and took command of the soon-to-be doomed Alamo, his trusted body servant Joe at his side. Santa Anna's Mexican army surrounded the old Spanish mission and demanded the unconditional surrender of all 200 defenders inside. There can be little doubt that during those tense days of captivity inside the Alamo, Travis began to lean heavily on Joe for more than the day-to-day mundane duties of a body servant. Joe was no stranger to living under the daily strain of harsh conditions. He offered William Travis a cool steadiness under extreme circumstances. From the confines of the Alamo, and with the Mexican army gathering outside the fort's walls, Colonel Travis penned a desperate letter, a call for reinforcements, a plea for help. In it, Travis vowed no retreat, no surrender, and ended the letter with the words, "Victory or death." The growing Mexican army had no plans to grant victory to the so-called defenders. Granting death? Now that was rapidly seeming much more likely. As for Joe, it wasn't victory he craved, nor was it death. His appetite had always been for freedom. As the foursome made their way into the town of Gonzales, Susanna promptly delivered the news to General Houston, news that he and Texas revolutionaries had feared. The Alamo was no more, its defenders slaughtered. After fulfilling his guide duty for Mexican General Santa Anna, Ben was offered a job to cook for Sam Houston's Texas Army. And being a free man of free will, Ben accepted the job offer. As for Joe, General Sam Houston and the Texas cabinet questioned him about the events from within the Alamo. Joe's eyewitness and blow-by-blow accounts of brave defenders made him a celebrity, a hero. After all, Joe was the only man known to walk out of the Alamo alive, and his knowledge of Mexican troop numbers and movements proved to be vital information to the Texas revolutionaries. A large part of what we know today about the Battle of the Alamo comes from Joe's testimony given that day in Houston's Gonzales camp. Joe's time in the limelight faded fast. He was promptly returned to slavery and put to work as a field hand on the Texas plantation of John Rice Jones. So much for a hero's reward. In April 1836, just a month after the Alamo Battle, the Texas revolutionaries launched a surprise attack on the Mexican army while they slept. To the rally cry of "Remember the Alamo," it took a mere 18 minutes for Sam Houston's force to defeat the sleeping Mexican army. This was the Battle of San Jacinto. Houston took Santa Anna prisoner, demanded, and was granted Texas independence, all while Santa Anna stood captive in his bed slippers. Instantly, Texas became its own nation, the Lone Star Republic. On the one-year anniversary of the Battle of San Jacinto, John Rice Jones and other wealthy Texans gathered to celebrate the victory that gave the birth to the nation of Texas. Wine glasses clinked, music played. But wine wasn't the only thing running that night. Joe slipped into the darkness off the plantation, disappearing from Texas for good. Some 40 days later, Joe reappeared in Alabama. It had been a perilous journey through the teeth of 4 slave states. Joe avoided slave patrols, bounty hunters' dogs, predators, and any other danger threatening to impede his mission. Joe's flight ended at the Travis family farm in Alabama. Upon his arrival, Joe gave intimate details about the death of the family's son and brother, William Travis. As the Travis family listened to Joe's animated account of Colonel Travis's final moments, they must have gotten some much-needed closure on the death of their young family member. Why had Joe made such a journey? Had this journey fulfilled a dying request of William Travis? Did he hope to achieve legal freedom as a reward? We may never know. Joe's story becomes less clear after his arrival in Alabama. Presumably, he remained enslaved on the Alabama plantation of William Travis's brother, Nicholas. There is no indication of any reward for his display of heroism. Sadly, nothing new in the life of Joe. When Nicholas Travis had a son, he was named Joseph Mark Travis. And not wanting their new son to share a name of enslaved property, Joe was forced to change his name. Joe chose the name Ben, the name of his eldest brother who died when Joe was a child. At this point, Joe, the enslaved survivor of the Alamo, disappears from the historical record. Well, kind of. In 1905, an article in the newspaper The Montgomery Advertiser claims that William Travis's youngest brother, James, returned to the site of the Alamo. With him was the former body servant of Colonel William Barrett Travis. His name? Old Ben.